Hey there, are you ready to lose yourself in a world of darkness and chilling tales? Go ahead, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let the shadows pull you in. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments when and where are you watching from. Let's see how far this darkness can spread. My Nana and I had a special relationship. It was the kind of bond that settles in the bones, quiet but profound. We didn't see each other often, but I think that made it all the more intense. Each visit was like unwrapping a rare gift, precious and fleeting. She had 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl, my mother. Mama used to say that Nana softened as she aged, but with me, there was something different. She called me the other daughter I prayed for. There was warmth in her voice when she said it, a quiet kind of pride. It was a warmth I never saw extended to my little brother Diego. I pitied him for it. Deep down, I'm sure Nana loved him, but her affection was like the sun peeking through a thick cloud. Fleeting, distant. Diego had allergies that seemed to flare up at the faintest whiff of pollen or citrus. Nana said it spoiled things. Diego would shrink at those words, blinking back tears, his small face scrunching in confusion and hurt. Every summer, Mama packed our bags, loaded us into the car, and we made the long drive to Nana's house. The house itself was a weathered beauty, nestled between groves of orange trees that stretched toward the horizon. It smelled of lavender soap, citrus zest, and something faintly medicinal, a scent that clung to the walls, the furniture, and Nana herself. Mornings were my favorite. Nana would wake me with a pinch on the cheek and a kiss on the forehead, her breath warm and smelling faintly of chamomile tea. We'd stroll through the orangery, the dew-drenched grass cool beneath our feet, collecting the ripest fruits for breakfast. She walked slowly, leaning heavily on her cane. When she reached up to knock down an orange, I would catch it, giggling when it tumbled into my hands. There was a ritualistic comfort to it all. The smell of citrus oils bursting into the morning air, the sound of leaves rustling overhead. Sometimes I'd glance back and catch Diego at the window, his small face pressed against the glass, watching us with a gaze I didn't yet know how to interpret. Years passed, but little changed. Nana grew frailer. Her once keen eyes faded to a misty pale, and her steps grew heavier. Still, our morning walks persisted. I would guide her hand to the branches, and she, with surprising precision, would pick the roundest fruit. I cherished those walks. They felt like a thread connecting me to something ancient and unspoken. Then came that summer morning when everything shifted. I was 11, Diego 6. I woke to silence. No pinch, no kiss. Just the thick, unnatural stillness that seemed to drape the house like a blanket. Confused, I slipped out of bed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The house was awash with golden morning light, dust motes swirling in the beams. I found Nana in the living room, sitting in her rocking chair, moving gently back and forth. She was gazing out the window, her pale eyes reflecting the sun-drenched garden. There was a faint smile on her lips, distant, like she was listening to a song only she could hear. She must have sensed me because she reached out her hand. I took it. Her skin was soft, like aged leather worn smooth with time. Wordlessly, she rose with a heave and led me toward the back door. Her grip was firm but trembled slightly. We walked, as we always did, beneath the canopy of orange trees. Birds sang overhead, their melodies weaving through the branches. Nana paused beneath a tree. her cane resting against the trunk. Slowly, she reached up and plucked an orange. She pressed it into my palms. Even though her eyes couldn't see me, I smiled at her and began peeling. That's when I noticed something was wrong. The flesh inside wasn't the familiar bright orange. It was red, darkening toward black. A bitter metallic scent hit my nose, making me gag. I pulled the segments apart, and rot revealed itself in grotesque folds. Maggots, white and writhing, spilled out like corrupted seeds, some landing on my bare feet. My stomach turned. I looked at Nana. She was still smiling, her face serene, untouched by the decay in my hands. Then, a sound that cleaved the morning in two, Mama's scream, sharp, panicked, raw. I dropped the rotten orange. Juice and filth splattered the grass. My heart pounded as I dashed back into the house. The stillness from before was gone, replaced by a charged dread. In the living room, Mama was on her knees, trembling, staring at the rocking chair like it was some kind of altar. My breath caught. Oh my God, Nana is dead. I walked into the garden with a ghost. The thought pierced me, chilling and impossible. Then Nana, solid, alive, brushed past me, her cane tapping rhythmically against the floorboards. Confusion twisted in my gut. Mama slunk away, sobbing. That's when I noticed it. A small red shoe dangling from the side of the rocking chair, barely visible beneath a scattering of orange peel. My blood ran cold. It was Diego. His little body curled in the chair, hands and mouth sticky with orange juice. His lips were swollen, face flushed with hives spreading across his skin. Later, we learned he'd woken early, determined to make us all fresh juice. He wanted to be part of the morning ritual, to bridge the gap that always seemed to separate him from us. But the oranges, his allergy, and Nana's faraway smile lingered in my memory long after. Was it love? Was it farewell? Or was it something else entirely? I was supposed to check in for a routine dentist appointment. Nothing major, just a cleaning. The kind of thing I'd done a dozen times before. The office was the same as always. A generic waiting room with beige walls, a fish tank bubbling in the corner, and a stack of magazines featuring outdated headlines. I remember sitting there 6 months ago, thumbing through an article speculating on a celebrity divorce that had long since been resolved. When I got to the receptionist's desk, she smiled warmly. "Name? David Langston," I said. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. Her smile faltered. She tilted her head, eyebrows knitting together. "Sorry, what was your name again?" "David Langston," I repeated, feeling a twinge of unease. She typed it again, more slowly this time. Her frown deepened. "I'm not seeing you in the system. Are you sure you have the right date?" I pulled out my phone, quickly scrolling through my emails. There it was, an appointment confirmation from their office. I turned the screen toward her, showing the time and date. It matched perfectly. Her confusion deepened. "1 second," she said, standing up. She disappeared into the back office. A minute passed, then 2. The fish tank gurgled in the silence. A kid coughed from across the room. When the receptionist returned, she wasn't alone. An older woman accompanied her. The office manager, I presumed. Her face was lined, her eyes sharp and assessing. She glanced at me, gave me a quick once-over and turned to the computer. "Name?" she asked. "David Langston," I said again, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. Her face went blank. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure," I joked weakly. "I've had it my whole life." She didn't laugh. Her fingers moved over the keyboard. Then she froze, staring at the screen like it had just bitten her. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice suddenly too careful. "There's no record of you. Not just for today, there's nothing under your name at all. It's like you've never been here before." That wasn't possible. I had a cavity filled here last year. I could still remember the sterile smell, the way the drill had whined in my ear. I glanced around the waiting room, the cheap landscape paintings on the walls, the receptionist with pink nails tapping nervously at her pen. This was the place. I reached for my wallet, ready to prove myself with my ID, but when I opened it, it was empty. No license, no debit card, no insurance card, just a few crumpled bills and a receipt from a coffee shop. My pulse quickened. I patted my pockets, checking and rechecking. My jacket, my jeans, nothing. I grabbed my phone again, suddenly desperate. I opened my contacts to call someone. Anyone who could vouch for me. The names looked wrong, like a list of strangers. I scrolled faster, heart pounding. Where was Mom or Jake, my best friend since college? Their names weren't there. I found a number I thought was Mom's, but it was labeled unknown contact. I tapped it, holding the phone to my ear. One ring, two. Then an automated voice. "The number you have dialed is not in service." My hand was shaking now. This was a joke. Some elaborate prank? But there were no cameras, no one laughing. Just that growing, awful silence pressing down on me. The older receptionist was still watching. "Are you okay?" she asked. Was I? Because suddenly, nothing felt real. My name, my past, slipping through my fingers like smoke. My reflection in the window looked back at me with wide, scared eyes. My eyes, I think. I stumbled back from the desk. I need to sit down," I muttered. "Do you want us to call someone?" the younger receptionist offered. Who would they call? Who could they call? I sank into a chair, head in my hands. I tried to think, retrace steps. I had woken up this morning in my apartment. My apartment, right? The one with the crooked blinds and the coffee stain on the kitchen counter. I had driven here. I remembered the traffic, the guy who cut me off on Maple Street. My car keys were still in my pocket. I pulled them out. Honda Civic, that was mine, wasn't it? But when I ran outside, the spot where I had parked was empty. My chest tightened. Breathing became work. Around me, the world felt thinner somehow, like a backdrop peeling away to reveal. What? Nothing? Who am I? The thought came unbidden, terrifying. Behind me, the door jingled as someone else entered the office, their steps slowing as they took in the scene. I wanted to ask them, "Do you know me? Can you see me?" But my throat closed up, words stuck. Reality, something I had taken for granted just an hour ago, was unraveling. And the worst part wasn't that no one knew me. It was that I wasn't sure I knew myself anymore. She had been collapsing, losing balance out of nowhere. My wife kept insisting they were just dizzy spells. I begged her to see a doctor, But you know how costly that can be. We were both working so hard, yet somehow we never seemed to catch up, always a step behind. Then came the hospital visit. The doctor pulled me aside and, with a heavy face, told me if I had any final words, now was the time. I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. Her grip was so faint it barely felt like a squeeze. My voice trembled, but I spoke from the deepest part of my heart. I told her I loved her more than anything in this world. I said I adored her terrible taste in peanut butter. Extra crunchy, the kind that always left crumbs everywhere. I confessed that even after 12 years of marriage, I was still clueless about what her job really entailed. I told her I didn't know how to face life without her. She pulled me closer with what little strength she had and whispered, "You have to keep going." I promised I would, but truthfully, I didn't believe my own words. Not long after she passed, I lost my job. My parents had already passed on and I never knew hers. Suddenly, I was surrounded by silence. No family, no income, drowning in grief and loneliness. Bills piled up, eviction notices appeared like clockwork. It felt like life was folding in on me. One night, when the weight became unbearable, I made a decision I thought was final. In my bedroom, I fashioned a rope and secured it to the ceiling. Fear gripped me, so I tried to ease it the only way I knew how, by putting on the Fellowship of the Ring. I thought, if Frodo could face his journey, maybe I can find the courage for mine. As Bilbo's birthday fireworks lit up the screen, I stepped off the stool. I dangled, swung. The world blurred, but then I heard it. Gandalf's voice echoing, "Fly, you fools." Confusion struck me. How long had I been like this? Why? Wasn't it working? Panic dissolved into anger. If this wasn't going to end things, I was going to find another way. Shaking free, I rushed to the car and drove to the nearest store. I bought several bottles of over-the-counter painkillers and a 2-liter bottle of pineapple soda, the kind she always teased me for liking. Back home, I popped in the 2 towers and started gulping down pills and soda, bottle after bottle. By the end of the movie, I was bloated, uncomfortable, and still breathing. Frustration boiled over. Desperate, I went to the closet and retrieved the old revolver my father had left me. Heavy, cold, reliable. I checked the chamber, loaded. Taking a deep breath, I raised it to my temple, ready for the silence I craved. Then, click. The TV turned off on its own. Heart pounding, I turned my head. Standing in the room was a figure draped in a dark cloak, holding a large scythe. My chest tightened. Was this it? "Finally," I muttered. "I'm ready. Let's go." The figure reached up and pulled back the hood. It was her, my wife. Tears immediately welled up. "Honey?" Her gaze was warm, familiar. "I know you miss me," she said softly, "but you have to live." I don't know if I can," I stammered, voice cracking. "I've stopped you twice," she replied gently. "I won't be able to again. This isn't your time." And just like that, she was gone. I broke down, tears pouring out like a flood I'd kept dammed up for too long. My chest ached with longing. How was I supposed to do this without her? Eventually, I wiped my face, set the gun aside, and dragged myself into the kitchen. I pulled out the jar of that ridiculously crunchy peanut butter she loved and slathered it onto bread. Crumbs everywhere, of course. I took a bite, the texture a mix of terrible and comforting. Somehow, amidst the grief, I felt a small, flickering warmth inside me. It wasn't happiness, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something like hope. it all began with a gift. "Well?" my son asked, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. "How do you like it?" Tom hadn't even unpacked his suitcase before pulling the small velvet pouch from his jacket pocket. He practically bounced with excitement, his youthful grin a reminder of how he used to be on Christmas mornings as a child. I turned the medallion over in my hands, the surface cool to the touch, the rough green stone awkward and weighty as I slipped the chain around my neck. "I love it, honey," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "Where did you get it?" "Mexico City," he beamed. "It's a good luck charm, supposedly ancient. The vendor said it brings purpose to those who wear it." I thought, after everything, maybe it could help. My smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but Tom didn't notice. Purpose. God knows I needed that. Since John had died last spring, I'd been drifting, lost in a fog of grief and emptiness. Tom had taken a gap year to stay with me, putting his own life on hold to pick up my pieces. This solo trip to Mexico was supposed to be his reward, a breather before returning to university. I had insisted he go, promised him I'd be fine on my own, but I wasn't, not really. Still, the necklace was hideous. A crude figure hacked from the stone, its features indistinct. Not something I'd ever wear, but I didn't have the heart to tell him. If nothing else, a little luck couldn't hurt. The first night I heard it. Thump. A slow, deliberate sound that echoed from somewhere deep in the house. Thump, thump. I turned on every light, checked every door and window. Nothing. The house was still, silent except for my racing heartbeat. I wrote it off as the house settling. But when the thumping came again the next night, louder, more insistent, doubt began to creep in. By the fifth sleepless night, the noise was driving me mad. It came from nowhere and everywhere, rattling the walls, echoing in my skull. Tom noticed the bags under my eyes, the way my hand shook when I reached for my coffee. "You all right, Mom?" he asked over breakfast. "You look pale." "I'm fine, honey," I lied, stirring my cereal. The spoon clinked against the bowl in time with the phantom drumbeat in my head. Thump, thump, thump. But it wasn't just the sound anymore. I began dreaming of places I'd never seen. Vast jungles, obsidian blades, blood pooling in ancient stone channels. I would wake gasping, the sheets tangled and drenched in sweat. Worse, each morning the necklace seemed to grow heavier, its presence a constant pressure against my chest. Tom suggested seeing a doctor. I told him it was just stress. The night before Tom was set to return to university, I was desperate. I downed 2 sleeping pills and chased them with a glass of whiskey, willing myself into oblivion. That's when I saw it. In my dream, I stood atop a towering pyramid beneath a sky ablaze with crimson clouds. Wind howled, carrying with it the scent of incense and something far more metallic. My hands clenched a blade of black obsidian, sharp enough to catch the firelight and glint like a star. The medallion hung around my neck, transformed. No longer a formless lump, it was a skull. Emerald green, eyes hollow and endless, teeth stained red. And it spoke. "Do you desire purpose?" it whispered. I staggered back. "Who are you?" I cried, squeezing my eyes shut. The thumping grew louder, reverberating through the pyramid stones beneath my feet. Thump, thump, thump. My pulse matched the rhythm. My breathing quickened. "Open your eyes and know my name." And I did. I awoke with a scream lodged in my throat, cold sweat soaking my skin. The thumping was deafening now, no longer confined to dreams. It pulsed in my veins, a glorious, undeniable beat. I stumbled out of bed, legs moving of their own accord, the kitchen bathed in the eerie glow of the streetlights outside. Tom sat at the table, looking up from his phone, confusion flashing across his face. "Mom? What?" But his words were lost to the rhythm. The blade was in my hand. When had I picked it up? I didn't know, didn't care. Purpose coursed through me, burning away doubt. I closed the distance between us in a heartbeat, and then his heart was in my hand. Wet, warm, beating, thump, thump, thump. The same perfect rhythm that had haunted me was now a symphony in my grasp. Tom's body slumped forward, blood spreading across the tiles in an ever-growing pool. I should have felt horror, grief, something. But all I felt was exultation. The medallion burned against my skin, the skull grinning, its voice a soothing caress. He was necessary, the first of many. Fulfill your destiny. Honor me. Lord 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀 demanded sacrifice, and I would deliver. I love exploring secondhand stores on rainy days. They always feel like a treasure hunt, where every item holds a secret story. That afternoon, I wandered into a small, dusty shop filled with forgotten memories. Rows of old books and trinkets lined the shelves, whispering tales of the past. I felt a thrill as I explored each corner of the store. Then my eyes fell on a jigsaw puzzle with a faded, worn box that seemed to call my name. I picked up the puzzle and examined its picture carefully. The box showed a room with a large window and a quiet, empty table. The image looked calm, yet something about it felt oddly familiar. I decided to buy it, thinking it would be a fun way to pass a gloomy evening. I paid for the puzzle and carried it home, excited to see the picture come together. Little did I know that this simple puzzle would soon change my life in ways I never expected. That evening, I sat at my small kitchen table and opened the puzzle box. I spread out all the pieces on the table and began sorting them by color and shape. At first, the pieces were just a jumble of random colors. I started with the edge pieces, slowly building the frame. Every piece I placed made the picture clearer. It was a picture of a room, and I soon realized that the room looked very much like my own. As I worked on the puzzle, I began to notice small details that sent a chill down my spine. The wallpaper in the picture matched the pattern on my wall. The table in the puzzle was nearly identical to the one I sat at. The light coming through the window in the image was the same soft glow I saw outside my own window. Piece by piece, the image seemed to mirror my very own room at that moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that the puzzle was showing me my real life. The more pieces I fitted together, the more uneasy I became. I watched as the picture slowly formed into a room that was an exact copy of mine, right down to the chair in the corner and the books on the shelf. I felt as though I was watching a live scene captured in time. My heart began to pound as I realized that this was no ordinary puzzle. It was as if someone had taken a snapshot of my life. Every detail was so precise that it made me doubt my own eyes. Finally, I placed the last few pieces into place. As the picture completed itself, my gaze was drawn to the window shown in the puzzle. There, in the far corner of the glass, was a dark, blurry shape that resembled a human face. I stared at it, my hands trembling, trying to understand what I was seeing. Was it just a trick of the light or something more sinister? The face looked out of place and frightening, and I felt a deep, unsettling dread. With a racing heart, I slowly rose from the table and walked over to my real window. The room was dim and quiet, with only the soft hum of the night outside for company. I hesitated for a moment before turning to look out. My pulse hammered in my ears as I peered into the darkness. And there, pressed against the glass of my window, was a terrifying face staring back at me, its eyes cold and unyielding. I froze in shock, unable to move or speak. The eerie face seemed to be watching every move I made. I backed away slowly, my mind struggling to process what was happening. I looked back at the puzzle, and it was clear. The image and my room were identical in every detail. I realized that the puzzle had captured my own space exactly as it was in real time. For a long, agonizing moment, I stood there, caught between the image on the puzzle and the horrifying sight outside my window. Every instinct told me to run, yet I was rooted to the spot by a fear I could not explain. I pressed my hands to my chest as I tried to steady my breathing, my mind reeling from the impossible coincidence. Even as the first hints of dawn began to filter through the curtains, I could not shake the terror of that night. I stayed in my room with all the lights on, refusing to face the darkness outside. The memory of the face in the puzzle and the face at my window haunted me, each one a reminder that sometimes the things we do not understand are best left unsolved. I will never forget that rainy night when a simple jigsaw puzzle revealed a truth too horrifying to accept. Every time I glance at a window or a reflection, I remember that chilling moment. And even now, the memory sends shivers down my spine. I was late. Again. I quietly cursed as I drove into the school parking lot, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Cars stretched ahead of me, a long snake of parents waiting for their kids. The air smelled like exhaust and damp pavement. I scanned the crowd, heart racing. I hated being late. It made me feel like a bad parent, like I wasn't keeping up with everything the way I should. Then I saw him, Evan. He stood by the curb with his backpack hanging off one shoulder, jacket open even though the chill bit through my sweater. His hair was messy, dark strands falling over his forehead. He wasn't talking to anyone, just standing there, staring at the ground like he was counting cracks in the sidewalk. Relief washed over me. "Come on, buddy," I called, forcing a smile as I rolled down the window. His head lifted, eyes meeting mine. There was something distant in his gaze, but before I could think too much about it, he shuffled over and climbed into the back seat. No hello, no excited stories about recess or what his friend Noah said at lunch, just silence. I glanced at him in the mirror. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound light. He nodded, but didn't speak. That was strange. Evan was usually a chatterbox, filling the car with stories and questions. Maybe he'd had a rough day. Kids have those, right? I turned out of the lot, tires crunching over gravel, and tried again. "Did you have gym or art today? You love art." Nothing. His gaze was fixed on the window, watching the trees slide by, their bare branches scratching at the sky. His face was still, too still. A flicker of worry twisted in my stomach, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just tired or starting to get sick. Kids get quiet sometimes, don't they? It didn't have to mean something was wrong. The drive stretched on in uncomfortable silence. I kept glancing back, hoping for a smile, a word, anything. But he just stared out the window, unmoving. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the road, flickering across his face like dark fingers. By the time we pulled into the driveway, my nerves were fraying. I parked and sighed. "We'll go inside, okay? I'll make you a snack." No response. I told myself to stop overthinking. Maybe he just needed some quiet time. Maybe I was the one making it weird. My phone buzzed. Probably a work email or some appointment reminder. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was from the school. "Hi, Mrs. Carter, just checking. Evan is still here in the office waiting to be picked up. Is someone else getting him today?" My stomach dropped. My eyes skimmed the message again, and again, the words blurring. No, that wasn't possible. Evan was right here, wasn't he? My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I felt the blood drain from my face. Hands trembling, I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The air felt thick, pressing down on me. Slowly, I turned toward the back seat. He was already staring at me, and then he smiled. It wasn't Evan's smile. Too wide, too cold. My breath hitched in my throat. "Evan?" I whispered, voice cracking. He didn't answer. My phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to move, to get out of the car, but I sat frozen. The world felt wrong, like I'd stepped into a dream that was souring into a nightmare. That face, it looked like my son's. The same hair, the same dimple on his cheek. But those eyes, those weren't his eyes, dark, empty, and staring straight through me. My chest tightened, breaths coming faster. I tried to open the door, tried to get out, but my hand wouldn't work. Fear rooted me in place. His smile grew wider. Too wide, not human, not Evan. And in that awful silence, the only sound was my heart pounding and that smile stretching impossibly across his face. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. It was past midnight when I finally crawled into bed, my body aching from the long day. The weight of exhaustion pulled me under quickly, my eyelids too heavy to fight. As I drifted off, the world around me melted into darkness, and soon I found myself in a strange place, a dense forest where the trees loomed like silent watchers. A thick fog curled around my feet, making it hard to see more than a few steps ahead. I turned in circles, trying to find a path, but everything looked the same. Then, from the shadows, a whispering voice slithered into my ears, sending chills down my spine. My breath came faster as I tried to walk away, but the whispers only grew louder, overlapping, echoing, filling my head. I broke into a run, my feet barely making a sound against the damp earth. The fog thickened, making it feel as if unseen hands were reaching for me. Then, suddenly, something grabbed my arm. I turned sharply, but there was nothing there, just the fog, swirling and shifting. My heart pounded. I needed to wake up. This had to be a dream. And then I did. My eyes shot open, my breath ragged. The relief was instant as I found myself lying in my bed, my familiar room bathed in dim moonlight. I sighed, pressing a hand against my chest to calm my racing heart. But something felt off. The air was heavy, and an eerie silence hung in the room. Slowly, I turned my head toward the clock on the wall. The hands were spinning rapidly, forward and backward. an unnatural blur. I froze. A creeping dread slithered into my stomach as I sat up. My breath fogged in the air like it was the dead of winter, though the room should have been warm. Then the walls. Dark streaks ran down from the ceiling, thick and oozing. Blood. A sudden knock at my door made me jump, my skin crawling. I didn't want to move, but something inside me screamed that I had to run. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. Before I could react, the door burst open, and a shadowy figure rushed toward me. I screamed and woke up. Again. I gasped, sitting up so fast that my head spun. My room was normal. No blood, no cold air, no spinning clock. My hands trembled as I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the fear. Just a dream within a dream, I told myself. I needed water. Swinging my legs over the bed, I stood, but the floor felt wrong, softer, almost like flesh. My stomach churned. Slowly, I looked down. The floor was pulsing beneath my feet, like it was alive. My breath caught in my throat as I stumbled back onto the bed, panic rising again. Then, in the corner of my eye, movement. I turned my head slowly, terrified of what I'd see. My closet door creaked open, though I hadn't touched it. Darkness oozed from inside, deeper than any shadow, and from it, a shape stepped forward, tall, wrong, its limbs twisting unnaturally as it grinned at me with too many teeth. I couldn't even scream this time. My body refused to move, locked in pure terror as the thing crept closer. Just as it reached for me, I woke up. I shot upright, gasping for air. My body was drenched in sweat, my hands shaking. This had to be real. I slapped my arm, hard, just to be sure. Pain shot through my skin, reality. I exhaled, forcing myself to breathe. No shadows, no living floor, no whispering voices. Just my quiet, empty room. I almost laughed at myself for being so scared. It was over. Then I noticed something at the foot of my bed. A figure sitting there, watching me. My breath caught. It wasn't some faceless monster, shadowy horror. It was me. A perfect copy, sitting there with a twisted smile, staring. My other self tilted its head and whispered, "Are you sure you're awake?" Everything went black. Growing up, my parents and I loved camping. I'm an only child, so every time we went camping, I always got my own tent. I was about 14 years old at the time. I'm 26 now, but I still vividly remember the experience. We lived in Maine, and if you've ever been there, you know how vast and dense the woods are. It felt like there was an endless stretch of forest surrounding us, and that made every camping trip an adventure. We went on a yearly camping trip, but there was one particular night that stands out more than any other. It was around 1 in the morning, and I was lying in my tent, wide awake. I thought I couldn't sleep, but in hindsight, I wonder if something was keeping me from it. The air was still, and the woods around us were eerily quiet. My tent wasn't fully zipped. One of those cheap tents where air didn't circulate very well, so I left it a little open for ventilation. That's when I heard it. The sound of a car pulling up. Something that seemed completely out of place in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't see much from where I was lying, but I could make out the shape of a white Ford vehicle. I didn't recognize the car, and I didn't know why someone would be out there so late, especially in the woods. A man stepped out of the car. It was hard to make out his face. The light from the car wasn't strong enough, and the shadows from the trees made everything feel more unsettling. He didn't seem to notice that I was awake, He walked up to my tent. My heart was pounding in my chest. I was frozen, unsure what to do. But right then, I blacked out. The next thing I remember is waking up to bright sunlight filtering through the trees. I was disoriented, and my parents were already packing up the campsite. They were getting everything ready to leave, and I hadn't even realized that I had fallen asleep again after hearing the man. I didn't tell my parents about the man I had seen because I assumed it was some kind of strange dream. We drove to the local supermarket that day. Our flashlights had died the night before, so we needed to buy new batteries. While we were there, I picked up the local newspaper. I was just casually flipping through it when my eyes landed on a headline that stopped me cold. The story read something like this: "Breaking. Boy gone missing. Suspected kidnapping in North Maine woods." I felt a chill run through me. The article described a boy who had gone missing in the woods near our campsite. The area they were talking about was incredibly close to where we had camped, maybe only 15 feet away from where my tent had been set up. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It described the boy's disappearance as a suspected kidnapping, and the authorities were still investigating the case. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about that night. The car I heard, the man who walked up to my tent, it all seemed like too much of a coincidence. I don't know if I was just too scared to confront the situation back then, or if I somehow blocked it out. But looking back, it feels like I narrowly avoided being caught up in something much bigger than me. The memory still haunts me. I never found out what exactly happened to that boy, but it's something that still makes me uneasy every time I think about it. I wonder, sometimes, if there's a reason I woke up when I did. Could it have been a warning? Could I have been in danger too? I'll never know for sure, but it's one of those experiences that'll stay with me forever. When I was just shy of 2 years old, my mother became gravely ill. She went to see a doctor and was given a devastating diagnosis. She had an aggressive illness that didn't offer much hope. While the exact details of her condition escape me, I know the prognosis was bleak. Despite that, the doctor encouraged her to try treatment. After all, there were those who had survived worse odds. My mother, however, was living a life that could only be described as a daily battle. At 42 years old, she was struggling to end a turbulent marriage to my father, a man who was unreliable at best and destructive at worst. He had drained her finances, disappeared for days on end, and, on one occasion, had even taken me from her, demanding money for my return. It was a chaotic, exhausting life. She was raising 7 children in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment while holding down 3 jobs, flipping burgers at fast food joints and cleaning rooms at a small hotel. Her eldest daughter, only 16, had recently become a mother herself and was grappling with raising her own child. Her second oldest daughter, 14, was rebellious and distant, unwilling to shoulder any responsibility. That left her eldest son, just 11 years old, to look after his younger brother and me, the baby. He sacrificed his childhood, giving up carefree afternoons with his Sega Genesis, to step into a role no child should have to fill. The pressure was relentless. My mother had no health insurance, no savings, and no lifeline. What little money she earned was already stretched thin, assigned to food, rent, and basic survival. When she received her diagnosis, I can't imagine what thoughts must have raced through her mind. The choice she made, though, was one of acceptance. She decided not to pursue treatment. It wasn't a decision made lightly, I'm sure, Fighting through grueling, weakening therapies might seem like the natural course, but surrendering, to come to terms with the inevitable, is its own form of bravery. She focused instead on preparing her children for life without her. Over the next few months, she arranged for her children to have new homes. The two eldest daughters moved out. Her teenage daughter moved in with her partner and his family. The next youngest daughter went to live with a cousin. Her two older boys were sent to her sister's house. And then there was me. My uncle fought for custody of me, as my father's instability was no secret. With her children accounted for, she was ready to face the end. It didn't take long. Within a few months, she entered a care facility where she was placed on medication to ease her pain. By that time, I was settling into my new home. My life had transformed. I now had more toys than I'd ever seen, warm meals every day, and a routine. I was dressed every morning, a small thing, but one I wasn't used to. I was cared for in ways I hadn't experienced before. Then, one day, something unusual happened. According to my aunt, who was watching me play, I was sitting on the living room floor, happily pulling toys from a chest and playing with each in turn. Across the room was one of those classic toy rotary phones on wheels, the kind with a smiling face painted on it, a red receiver, and a string for pulling it around. Harmless, right? That's when it started ringing. My aunt swears to this day that it did. She was sitting on the couch, distracted by the TV, when the toy phone emitted a sound. Not the mechanical ching of its dial, but a distinct ringing, as if it were a real phone. At first, she thought she was imagining things. Then, I stood up, walked over to it, and picked up the receiver. "Hi, Mommy," I said. My aunt froze. I continued. "Is it time?" "Okay, I know, I will. I'll be a good boy and listen to Aunt and Uncle." "I love you, Mommy." I set the phone down, turned to my aunt, and said, "Your turn." Then, just like that, I went back to playing as if nothing had happened. Before she could process what she'd just seen, the actual house phone began to ring. My aunt answered, and on the other end was a nurse from the care facility. My mother had passed away just 5 minutes earlier. The story has always stayed with me. Was my aunt mistaken? Could it have been the power of a child's intuition, piecing together the subtle signs of his mother's fading presence, or did something extraordinary happen? A final connection from a mother to her child, using whatever means she could to say goodbye. Children are more perceptive than we often give them credit for, capable of noticing the things adults might try to hide. It's possible that I sensed her decline, her absence, the unspoken heaviness in the air. But that moment, that toy phone ringing at the exact time of her passing, that part is harder to explain. What do you think? I always thought reality was a constant, a stable thing, something you could rely on, like gravity or the taste of coffee first thing in the morning. But now, as I sit in this cold, sterile room, I'm not sure about anything. It started 3 nights ago. Or was it 4? Time's slippery now, twisting around me like smoke. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me, the blades casting lazy shadows on the walls. There was a sound, barely a whisper, coming from the hallway. At first, I thought it was the wind, or my imagination, but it kept happening night after night. Soft footsteps where there should be none, whispers curling around my ears, words I couldn't quite catch. I live alone. Or at least, I thought I did. The first time I really noticed something was wrong was when I woke up to find my bedroom door open. I always close it before bed, always. Habit, keeps the darkness contained. But that morning it yawned open, darkness still pooling beyond it, even with the sun shining through my window. I laughed it off, told myself I must have forgotten. But that nagging feeling, like something was watching from the doorway, stayed with me. Then things started moving. Small things. My keys weren't on the hook, my phone charger wasn't by my bed. I found my wallet in the freezer. The freezer. I don't drink, so I couldn't blame it on that. Sleepwalking? Maybe. But it didn't explain the messages. They started appearing 2 nights ago. Scratches on my bathroom mirror. Not written with anything I could identify, just thin, spidery lines gouged into the glass. The first message said, "Don't look." Look at what? I tried scrubbing it off, but it was etched deep, permanent. That night I didn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes felt like a breath against my neck, and the whispers, closer now, seemed to know my name. Last night I found a note on my kitchen table. Same spidery handwriting. Stop remembering. But what was I remembering? My head hurts all the time now, like something's pressing against my skull from the inside, trying to claw its way out. And my reflection. God, my reflection isn't right. I avoid mirrors now because when I catch a glimpse, it doesn't blink when I do. It just stares, smiling, waiting. I tried calling someone, anyone, but my phone only dials static. My contacts are gone, my photos are just black screens. I thought about leaving, running. But when I opened the door to my apartment this morning, it wasn't my hallway outside, just darkness, endless, breathing. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe I'll find it again when I forget everything. I think that's what it wants. For me to forget. For me to stop being me. The scratching started again. From behind the closet door. I won't look. I won't. But God help me. I can hear it breathing my name, and I think it sounds like me. I don't know how long I sat there trembling. Minutes? Hours? The scratching stopped, but then came the knock. Just one. Software measured. Polite. Like whatever it was knew how to mimic human manners. I held my breath, hoping, praying, it would go away. It didn't. Another knock, then a voice. David? It was my voice. Perfectly pitched, perfectly calm. David, I think you should let me in now. This will be easier if you just stop fighting. I bit my fist to keep from screaming. How does something use your own voice against you? My body wanted to move, to get up, to run. But where? There's nowhere to go. The windows show the same darkness outside as the front door. No stars, no streetlights, just void. I ran to the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it. As if that would help. My reflection grinned at me again. This time, it moved before I did. Its lips stretched into an impossible smile. Almost time, it whispered. My ears rang. I covered them. No use. The voice was inside me. And then I remembered something, or maybe it was planted there 6 months ago, a sleep study, paid well, easy money, they said, just a few nights of observation, harmless. But the dreams started after that. I thought they were just that, dreams. Faces I didn't recognize, words I didn't understand. Except now, they feel like instructions. like a program running in the background of my mind, waiting for the right moment to execute. What did they do to me? The knocking turned into pounding, my name, chanted like a hymn. David, David, David. I pressed my back against the door. Wood splintered. Tears blurred my vision. I'm not a religious man, but I prayed, begged, bargained with whatever God would listen. The closet door in my room creaked open. No one was there, just me, standing there, smiling, eyes hollow, hands outstretched. You can't fight yourself forever, it said. Soon you'll remember everything, and then you'll let me in. I want to forget. I want to rip my brain out, scratch out every memory, make it stop. If you find this, don't look in the mirror. Don't listen to the voice that sounds like you. And whatever you do, don't remember.